when Holly sent us the email for this event, I thought like this is so relevant, appropriately named, reflecting the sun, because that's what the moon does, right?
Mm.
The moon is not always seen, but sometimes she is seen completely in her full glory. Sometimes, like now, I think it's dark moon, right? She's not seen at all, and that is so feminine.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, the moon receives that light from the sun. So it is the container. It is actually the sun needs for there to be an audience. It's associated with the sign Leo. So that requires the reception and the validation from the crowd. And in the case of the sun, it's all the planets reflecting that light, and particularly the moon as it applies to the earth, because of our, the way that we've divided time is the day is based on the sun and the month is based on the moon.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
interesting side note, Sevilla is a Leo. So it is also interesting that she's one of the most visible women in this corner of the internet.
Yeah, this morning I pulled the card The Unseen, and it's cool because it's got it's almost like a moon flower with wings, like petals, instead of wings instead of petals, and then like eyes on the tips of the fingers, which I was reading about this culture where they say that women were created from the divine old woman's wrinkle on the sole of her foot, because we have so many eyes as women. Like we feel, just like the sole of the foot feels, we feel everything, and feel everything beneath us. And so, of course, that's more feminine than it is the sun masculine energy. But I am curious too, Lizelle, just sort of about the seeing women in the corner of the internet. And I actually had not heard of that term, corner of the internet. So that was new to me.
There are a few other as well, but they're older. And interestingly, most of the women don't call their YouTube channel by their own name. They have another name for the YouTube channel. I do find that interesting as well.
What do you make of that? Say more.
I don't know. It just came up to me. What do you guys make of that?
I mean, I don't know if it's the same thing, but yesterday we were talking about how when we see like men or very masculine figures talk to each other, it tends to be like this dyad, like it kind of negate and and like validate each other in this kind of like contrasting kind of way. Whereas when you have a group of women, you don't really have the same sort of dynamic where like you define yourself by the other, but it's like all the voices kind of at the same time, and it's a lot more flowy and it's less defined. And we were talking about that a little bit, about how like a lot of this masculine energy seems to want to like put boundaries on things and define things with like this kind of gestalt thing, whereas the feminine seems to be a lot more undefined and unclear and okay with that. And I don't know, it just reminded me of that, like not needing to put your name or not wanting to put your name because maybe it's not your identity you're putting forward, but it's something else. I don't know, it reminded me of that. We talked a bit about that yesterday.
The soft glow of the moon in contrast to the bright rays of the sun.
Yeah, we mentioned that the sun can kind of be obnoxious with how bright and, ever present it is. And so having like that reception, like being able to receive that in a loving kind of way is this positive side of the feminine or the yin. It can receive that, emanating light. And, the sun is often associated with the ego too, or the kind of journey of the soul. So when it comes to that, it's like this concept of time that we have. There's a pathway, there's a future. And when we're working toward that future, there's meaning in that, there's importance in that. So the sun, it kind of illuminates this pathway that your soul, and I keep emphasizing SOL, your soul is on this journey. So yeah, the moon is representative of the environment within which that journey takes place. So it's the container for that journey. So yeah, the soul's path, this idea is, the path that the sun takes during the daytime. It's steady, it's consistent, and it continues. We can believe that the sun will rise again tomorrow. There's some consistency to that sun, and so it provides us this ideal to which we can strive toward, which is kind of, you can look at it as discipline, you can look at it as growth, or whatever it is, but that is what the sun is kind of representative of. It is the life force, and the moon is the container for that life force. So that's why with these conversations, particularly when groups of women like us get together and have conversations, there's no ego that we're trying to push forward. There's no, well, we all have egos, but there's no desire for me to attach myself to this so that a legacy is formed from this conversation. Whereas you can definitely see that with some of the philosophers, particularly that we follow, there's something about having their name imprinted in that as well to continue this story, because it's important. It's important to know, well, who'd you get that story from, so that I can trace that back and see this path, this journey, this evolution of this story that is about the human cycle, the evolution of humans. So it's really interesting how that works.
I have to admit, I'm pretty guilty fairly recently of like wanting my name, like having that ego drive, and then getting knocked on my ass, like appropriately, back into humility, the ground, humility, humus, etymology there, the ground of being, like the earth from where I came. But there is a tension there of like, how do I, this soul, I love that. I love this juxtaposition of SOL, SOUL. How do I nurture and cultivate that so it is providing warmth, a particular ray, a particular illumination of something, without getting so trapped, right, in mine and me. This ritual that Rebecca recently designed, for the Stoa around, Chapel Perilous and entering into the unknown, it's been really powerful. I had a really powerful experience with it this morning of like, letting go of knowing, letting go, like a really famous Zen koan, not knowing is most intimate, and having the intimacy of the unseen, of the unknown. But then like a longing and aching to be seen,
Yeah, isn't it funny that the sun can't go to those dark places? That we do actually need the moon to, kind of reveal our shadow or our dark side of the moon. Like all that kind of imagery is something that the sun can't do, because it's always lit up and it always needs attention,
But talking of rituals and talking of the sun always being there. So also what I did this weekend, because I arrived a little earlier, so I made for myself a ritual every morning, if weather permits, and one morning when weather didn't permit, I went to the lake, because Lake Superior is in Thunder Bay, beautiful, and the sun actually rises over the lake. So that is quite a sight. But before the event started, I went to see the sunrise. I read a poem, the angel poems of Rilke. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Oh, Rilke.
It's beautiful, right?
Do you have it with you, Giselle? Would you be able to read it?
Oh, it's very long.
Okay.
It's,
Oh, it's like a whole.
yeah, and one poem is like a few pages, and I read it in both because I have a really awesome copy. So it's like the English version is on one side and then the German on the other.
Mm.
And my German is not really existent, but I can kind of read it. So then at least you get the sound of the, but
Yeah.
it's like every poem is like 3 pages or 4 pages. So it's a bit long to read now. And the first day before the event started, the clouds were like too thick. So I could see the light of the sun, but I couldn't see the sun itself. And that was also symbolically I thought that was quite insignificant, or not insignificant, and interesting. Like, what does it mean? And I think I wrote, because we had collective journaling, I joined that, and I wrote something about this darkness that we're in now is not the darkness of the depth of the night. It's the darkness just before the dawn, but a dawn that will break through the clouds. And that then I think the Friday or the Saturday, I'm not sure, it was raining, but I woke up at 5 and I was like, I need to go out there. And so I did. And I did it. I took my book with me, but I didn't read because that would be really messy. But I just spontaneously did some sort of dancing ritual, because also at the lake where I went to sit, there's like this circle of stones, and you can sit on the stones, which is also amazing. It's like so I just, within the circle, I just did some sort of dancing towards the sun and then away from the sun, but kind of beckoning the sun to break through. I was soaked, but it was really, really special. And then just after the event, the first day after the event, the sun, it was the first time that I actually saw the sunrise over the lake. There was no clouds, and I had to cry because it was just like so powerful symbolically. There it is. It's broken through the sun. And so playing on that whole, the sun being constantly seen and the moon not, that is also not true, but it's not due to the sun that he's not seen. It is other elements.
Yeah, this, brings me back to something Holly mentioned yesterday about just before the dawn. Could you talk about what you were, and then I could relate it back with the astrology?
Yeah, like the water, the dawn is, and was also related to a lake, the sun rising out of the water, the horizon of water, which is like the womb, the dawn being the womb, and the sun rising out of that, and then the sun developing across the sky over the day. So infancy into adolescence, into adulthood, and then into elderhood, and then it sets. And so the womb being the dawn, and the water. Oh, it's so beautiful to think about, this ocean of in our belly, the water of the lake, the ocean in our belly that births out life. So yeah.
Yeah, so with astrology, there is this idea that just before you're born, you are, experiencing being in the womb. And for astrology, the zodiacal wheel, so it's a circle and it's divided into 12 30-degree pieces. So you have 12 of them. The first one is descriptive of kind of your personality, or it can, bring up themes about your personality, your body. Well, the 12th house is this space that's kind of the unseen realm. It's your blind side. It's your connection with the spirit realm beyond the veil. This is the 12th house. This is where you would have been during the labor of your birth. So your first house, the ascendant, is the exact time of birth, where the 12th house would be kind of the experience that you had in the womb. And so that was an interesting analogy, is that, yes, this is kind of the dawn, just before the break of the sun for the child too, for the child to be born and to have that laminating moment of the ascendant crossing. So the constellation of your ascendant would be crossing over the horizon at that point. So
there's also a death taking place, right? Because the child is leaving this home that it has learned, right, for 9 months. So it's really interesting to think it's also the birth and then
leaving that
of death, right?
Yeah, that matrix is another. There's the moon again. So the moon is the matrix. It's the container. It's the mother. It's our relationship with the mother.
I was thinking, I mean, this whole thing about the sun being seen and not seen, I was thinking about it kind of the other way around, like, because it is the structure, because it is the rhythm, because it is this very consistent thing that happens every day, then it's like the backdrop to everything, right? Like everything is defined in contrast to its light. And then I was like, I feel like it can be the other way around as well, where it's not seen in the sense that it's kind of taken for granted, right? Like it takes too much of this background role of this, like, oh yes, it's gonna be there. Oh yes, it's very predictable. Oh yes, it's within this very like established structure. And I don't know, I was just thinking about that as well, of like the other way around, and if that happens, because yesterday we were talking a little bit about like the sun and the moon, and like, okay, masculine, feminine, and how the sun is doing while the moon is being. So there's that's kind of thing where like one is like has this more like active pursuit element kind of thing, whereas the other seems to be more passive and receiving. But and I was just kind of like playing with those ideas of like how that like discipline, like you were mentioning, or that structure, or whatever, that rhythm, however important it is, I think like when you take it too far, right, it can feel like a trap as well, like, and then it suffers from this like being taken for granted, or being seen as like obvious, and being like kind of caged in a structure of its own making. And then on the other hand, you might have the moon or the passive or whatever, where like it's good when it's receiving, but then it can just kind of like deflate and fall completely flat, and nothing is really happening, nothing is really being born, and it's not really even open to receive. So yeah, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but it was just like of thinking of like the kind of the other side of seeing this routine and this structure and this like this blessing of having the sun come out every day, but also it's like, oh, what happens when we kind of take it for granted? Is that something that I don't know? I'm not sure.
Are you hinting at like falling into dull routine? There goes the moon.
Oh, there goes the moon.
I don't know if it's routine or if it's more like the force of the structure and kind of I guess that's why maybe the sun and the moon is important. You need like the dialogue between both. I feel like the sun on its own would like fall trap of its own structure, of its own like coming up and down all the time. There needs to be something else to kind of take the sun out of this. Is kind of the instinct I'm having.
It's interesting. The way that you're like framing this is making me think about how people don't notice the moon. We were talking like people don't know when there's a full moon. People don't know when it's a new moon if they're not on that focus, if they're not focusing on the stars at night. Like most people don't know that the brightest stars are planets. Most people don't know that the constellations indicate a section of the sky that you can use for navigation. They've heard it. They're like, oh, hunter-gatherers, yeah, they used the stars to navigate. It's like, but do you understand that when hunter-gatherers stopped moving and started to map the sky, they could tell you so many other things. or we're at least somehow linking up with this cycle that is happening. All these cycles that are happening, Saturn's cycle of 30 years, that's a different measurement. And if we look where Saturn was 30 years ago and then where it is now, we can see themes, we can see patterns. Whether or not those patterns are real or not doesn't matter, because we're picking up on something that we don't even know how we're measuring it. So it's interesting because you mentioned the sun, because with astrology or astronomy, we started out with a geocentric perspective. We had the earth in the middle, and that was how humans saw the world, was this geocentric perspective. But now we have this heliocentric perspective. We've placed so much emphasis on the sun, the life path, this ideal to which we strive. There's so much emphasis on it. And you're right, like what happens when we start to take that for granted and we just think this is the cycle, and it continues to show up, and it's predictable. What happens when we do what we did with the moon and what we did with the stars? We don't see them anymore. Like there's so much light pollution that we can hardly even see the stars at night. We're blocking them out. That's our ancestors. We're blocking them out. We block the moon out. We don't care about her anymore. So what happens that day, or those, far enough into the future, whatever it is, before maybe we get burnt up by the sun because we don't care about it, like whatever happens. But that's such an interesting thing to think about as it applies to like our life, our meaning, and the ideal to which we strive.
I'm also thinking, because when you were talking about soul, and then soul, you also referred that we are as women made from the soul under the foot.
Nice.
So that soul is also important, because that also we've lost contact with the earth.
Yes.
Like how many of us still walk barefoot on the earth?
Right.
It's
yes. Yeah. This is so resonant. Like on that recent fast I did, there was just this real sense, especially upon returning, of like the loneliness of the moon, of like, and the earth when it's not being seen. And it's really interesting, heliocentric. And then it's like, maybe we need to take a shift to moon centric, that maybe there's a call to look at the moon as being the thing that we.
Well, what about back to geocentric?
Yeah.
She's our earth. She's our mother.
Yeah. I mean, I think with geocentric, it was actually more human centric, right? It was like, we're the center of everything. Everything revolves around us. Was sort of the sense I got. I mean, the story that I heard, in history class there.
Well, as women, we are actually very aligned with the moon and our cycle, and the fact that it takes 28 to 30 days, if things are all balanced. But yeah, we have continued this intimate connection with that sphere that, revolves around us, whereas men don't have that sense. And so this is an extra kind of sensory organ that we have, because we have our eyes, we have our ears, we have our nose, we have our mouth, we can touch things. But for women, we have almost this additional sense of, oh, it's that time again, and that's every month that happens, where, it doesn't happen for men. So there's no, and it's not this isn't saying, well, they can't, they certainly could if they'd look up, and I'm not calling out all men. Some men do know the lunar cycles. There's plenty of men in astrology. But yeah, it's just interesting that because we're kind of forced to, we have maintained that, and fortunately we maintained that.
I actually almost feel sorry for men now. So like the sun, they just constantly have to shine like the same thing every day, like here I am. So
I don't know. And the thing that Sarah was just saying about like having your cycle, that kind of happened to me this month. Like when I think I got my period last week, and it took me completely by surprise, and because I wasn't expecting it, and it's not like it came earlier or anything. Like, it came when it was supposed to. It's just like I've been so busy and doing other things that I completely lost track of it. And then it hit me. It was like, oh wow, like it's been a full moon, like a full moon cycle of this. And that's just how like distracted I've been. But at least, yeah, it acts as this reminder, like, hey, and now I'm just thinking, like, what if I didn't have that? Like, I feel like, you know what I've noticed with, and I don't know if this is, and maybe it is or maybe it's not, but I've noticed this with a lot of my male friends. Their sense of time is very different. Like a lot of the men I know, to me, it seems like for me, it can be months, and I measure and I feel the months, and for them, it feels like it's been 2 weeks. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but like their sense of time sometimes, like I talk to my friends, especially now with COVID, so a lot of them tell me, like, I don't know, to me it feels like the past 3 years have been a month or two. And I was thinking, like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, there's something as well about like recognizing the moon every month. Somehow maybe it shifts even our perception of time itself. I'm not sure, I just got this idea right now, but just putting together, because it's not just like, I know several guy friends who are like this. Like there's the way, and even they say, like, oh yeah, I don't know, it feels like it's been a month. I was like, what do you mean? It's been a year and a half. Like, like, I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. Maybe there's something about that, about like that default recognition of the moon we have, that kind of like, it's like tells us, hey, no, it's time to look at this thing again. And in that sense, yes, it's a blessing, and in that sense, yes, like now I feel sorry for men too.
It's our time for reflection, and we all know that if you have an unobserved life, then it flies by. You don't notice the difference in the days because nothing changed. But for us, we have to go in our calendar and be like, okay, so I started that day last week, like, and then it makes you have like this whole review of your whole month.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I want to bring forward again, just because it's so present for me right now. It's so alive, of like, I guess it's grief and the loneliness of not being seen, of and I've been really feeling really intimately into that, of the moon not being witnessed, the earth not being witnessed. And that's just been what excuse me, weighing really, really heavily on me. There's anger that's coming up around that. And yeah, I just think of the moon hanging in the sky, and sometimes just so beautiful and bright, and she's cool with it at times, but also just sometimes feeling really lonely up there.
It's interesting because the house that's associated with, or the zodiacal sign that's associated with the sun, is Leo, and it's this kind of needs attention. It's associated with creativity, and kind of like this kid I mentioned yesterday, this kid that's drawn a piece of art. I got this story from this book called Horoscope Symbols by Robert Hand. And it's about Leo being this kid that's got a piece of art that they've created. They're going around to show it to every adult because it's the most amazing thing that's ever happened, and they need everybody to see it. They just need that attention. They need that validation, and they need that, that audience. Whereas this sign that's opposite to Leo, so this would be Aquarius. Leo is opposite from Aquarius. And Aquarius is kind of this black sheep, the oddball, but this archetype that defines itself by what it is not. So it can be this, it can be on its own. It can be individual in this way where it's noticing its value to the group by how it is different, by how it is separate. So there's something to like understanding these dyads, these ways that, you know, the full axis works of Leo to Aquarius is really helpful for understanding why it is that the sun demands all that attention despite it being, um, you know, just absolutely not the most important of all the planets. Like, and in ancient astrology, the sun and the moon are planets too. They're called luminaries. So that's why I said planets. I know. But the other planets have to reflect this light of the sun. And so they bring up different dichotomies as well. There's so many different axes. There's so many different ways that the planets can present in these archetypes. But yeah, the interesting thing about the moon is it's nurturing. And so it's nurturing to that Leo, to that sun. It provides it that that environment, that space to reflect. And that's what we were talking about with our collective spaces. For instance, collective journaling. And then for me, I do karaoke on Sundays with a group. And so for the feminine container, for us to provide these spaces for each of our individual souls to kind of be seen. This is where the magic is happening. And this is kind of what this whole pandemic brought us to realizing is that we do need these collective spaces for each of our individual, you know, kind of soul purpose to be highlighted so that other things can reflect to us, other things, other people can reflect to us what it is that our, you know, journey is about, what it is that makes us that soul, that sun, what essence it is that we have. So these kinds of containers, the moon's space is really, really important for the sun and for the kind of Leo archetype.
I keep thinking about the idea of love or care, and how maybe that's what's missing, like the sun loving the moon, and the sun loving the earth and caring about it. And,
the sun is one of the significations of the sun is the heart, or Leo really is. So that's the organ that's associated with that sign. So yeah, embracing that heart.
And then because I'm thinking then of maybe we disheartened the sun, maybe we disheartened men by not allowing them to love us as.
No, like yesterday, we also I mentioned something. I think it goes along those lines as well. As like, I think more where I see the cultural landscape is or whatever. I think it's like we don't, either we've forgotten or we're not making the sun capable of loving the moon. That's the thing. I feel like we see the sun and we see how powerful and how big and how grandiose it is. So we're like, how could something so big and so, you know, majestic or whatever love like a passive piece of rock like the moon? Like it, you know, it's like we have made them not, I don't want to say equal, but like we've made them not able to be lovers who can like reciprocate each other. We're just looking at like at the grandiosity of the sun, and it was like, how can something, you know, so big and constantly growing and that is enlightening everything possibly care about something as passive and just there as the moon? That's the vibe I'm getting, is like, and it resonates with what you're saying, is like, oh, we're not seeing the sun's ability to love, but I think there's an implication of like of the moon's unworthiness compared to the sun's like grandiosity, and that's, I don't think it's the truth, but something about how we're handling things right now as I don't know, as a culture seems to kind of be pushing that sort of viewing, to me at least. is the vibe I'm getting.
It speaks to me. It really
Mm.
speaks to
I've been embroiled in sun, like living in Texas. Okay. Like, so this is maybe where some of my like heat is coming from around this. But what's happening is the sun is so fucking intense. It's sucking out all the water. and it's breaking my heart.
Mm.
Like lakes are drying up, streams are drying up. And there's just this sense of like, there needs to be some moisture. Like I'm just, sun, like cry some tears, like feed these lakes, feed the soil, like please. I mean, yeah, so I don't know how the sun plays into that, but there is kind of this sense of like a real longing for more moisture, more wetness, more tears to be cried. And that feels strong inside of me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even thinking about like Leo as this child, and the child, yeah, there's that point at which they'll cry, but Leo isn't kind of representative of that point. And in fact, you move into Virgo when Leo has his fall, when Leo's on the stage and, he doesn't get the appraise or he doesn't get the applause. Then you move into Virgo, which is the virgin that takes us through the underworld. So she has to kind of contend with the things that happen with Leo not getting all the attention that Leo wanted. So you just move into a completely different side for that.
Right. And so then that plays into humility again. So it's like this Leo or the sun, like shifting back into the humility again. If we look at humus, earth, ground, of soil.
It's an earth sign. Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's something that maybe needs to happen there where, yeah, that's really interesting. Like a humility, like the sun's so radiant and Leo so beautiful, and a call for humility around all that.
Well, we are like today, yesterday was the equinox. So at this point, the sun begins to descend even further past the equator, down to what we call the South Tropic here up in the northern hemisphere, but it's the Tropic of Capricorn. And so now the sun is descending from darkness into even more darkness. So this is that fall from grace. And in fact, Libra is the sign of the fall of the sun, because it's opposite from Aries, which is its exaltation. So Libra, the fall of the sun down from the equator to the southern tropic. So this is kind of that time where, culturally we begin to prepare for this like cold winter, and you have to have things organized. Pardon me. And that's what we have been doing this past season, this past Virgo season. We've been kind of putting things into order, harvesting. Virgo's associated with the harvest. So now we're entering into Libra, which is this time of harmony, and it is ruled by Venus, so it's very Venusian, it's very feminine in that way, and it's all about being diplomatic, putting partnership, in the forefront. So it's an interesting thing about the Libra being the fall of the sun, and then it's also about partnership and harmony.
So is there collectively, I mean, we're looking at this more of like within the year, right? But on a like Pluto scale, what does astrology show us about what season we're in right now? Like in 100 year, I mean, I don't know how it's measured.
Yeah, that's interesting. So of course we know that the sun and the moon are kind of what give us days and months. And you're talking about Pluto's cycle. So Pluto is actually like a 250-year cycle. It takes Pluto that long to return back to where it was. And so what we're experiencing, as far as the astrology is concerned, is kind of since 2008, we've been experiencing the United States Pluto return. So 250 years into the creation, of this country as it is now, with the constitution that we have now, is approaching this Pluto return. And so things like the 2008 crash are being associated with this Pluto return. So that's one of the things. And then secrets being revealed. This is what Pluto is about: transformation, secrets being revealed, death, and rebirth. And so all of these themes that we've been, experiencing from 2008 to kind of now-ish, it really went exact sometime this past year or the year before. So we've been kind of in the most intense part of it, you could say, recently. So, yeah.
And this sort of speaks to Lazelle's premonition about a dawn, like this sort of dark night is not like, it's actually a dawning of something.
I'm actually really hopeful for our future. But, and then I mean it symbolically. How do we teach the sun not to be so overpowering, and how to not suck the moist out of us? I'm sure the sun doesn't want us moisters. It's not kinky.
Did you say it's not kinky?
Yeah.
I don't know. Men love moisture. I mean,
Moistless. That's what I mean. They don't want that. The sun doesn't want that either, I'm quite sure. But as far as the sun, and of course I mean the symbolic thing, I don't mean that the sun has consciousness and actively wants. But
Right. I think my relationship with the sun, obviously, because I've got all the planets, like I can utilize those other planets to help me deal with the sun, you could say. And so the way that I look at the sun is a lot less mature than kind of what we presented here. I see the sun as, oh, that's cute. Like, that's so sweet, as opposed to, or if you want to shine all day, honey, you can shine all day. So it's more of like an endearing relationship with the sun, because I know all the other planets are like wreaking havoc and also very harmonious with their relationships and things like that. So the way that I call on these archetypes is to embody them. And so for me with the sun, like I have like, I live near my grandparents, and when I visit with them, I always kind of associate my grandpa with the sun, and he drives me insane. Like he's got dementia and Alzheimer's, and he's never been a really stand-up person in general, but he's always been a hard worker. He would get up every day before the sun would come up, and he would work. And so that's kind of like, now that he can't do that anymore, he feels like he has no purpose. And so, of course, his condition will sometimes express as rage, or just like asking the same question over and over again. And I feel that rage, and I get annoyed. And he always needs to be the center of attention. My grandma brings him his food to his recliner, where he puts like a bib on, like all these things. And so I've really had to heal that relationship with the masculine in that way of, even though he's older than me, that's he's like a child. And so that's how I look at him, is that I have to care for him. I have to show him how to nurture. I have to show him that he's still worthy, even if he's not able to perform these tasks that he's always done. And, another thing that the sun is associated with is ideas, thoughts, illuminating thoughts. And he doesn't have those anymore. And for the sun to not even be able to illuminate ideas within their mind that they once could, it's something that you can kind of have a little bit of, like, I feel sorry, kind of like we were talking about feeling sorry for men for not having a cycle. Like, I kind of feel sorry for him. And that has helped me to really soften this boundary that I had against the masculine that was developed through an abusive relationship. And I, there have been times in my grandpa's history where he has, every single story he ever tells is about a fight he was in. So that aggression was something that I had to soften to instead of being aggressive back, because that's how I started out. I took my mom outside. I was like, I'm going to kill him, like I really felt very strongly about how much I disliked him. And then I started, how I started to notice that wasn't okay was that my mom's a double Cancer. She is the epitome of the moon. She is the most feminine, most open, most receptive. And when I say feminine, I don't mean that she wears Prada bags and has fake tits. That's not what my mom is. My mom's an engineer. My mom is a soil surveyor. My mom is the most open, receptive, and feminine person in this most feminine way. And she just held me in that. She didn't judge me. She didn't get, upset and feel like I was judging her for her father being a moron. She just said, you probably don't need to go back inside. She didn't want me to face him with my rage. She didn't want me to face him with my anger. She wanted me to come back when I was clear-headed and when I could be open and receptive to him. So I think maybe that whole experience had a lot of healing in it for me, and recognizing the sun is kind of this really immature and needs attention part of our psyche.
Mm-hmm. It also makes me wonder about the shadow side of the moon and how the sun gets annoyed with the moon.
Ooh.
Planet gossip, yes.
Welcome to astrology.
That's basically what it is, right? It's just like
it's the tabloid.
It's like, did you hear what Mars did to Venus? Oh my
god. Really, it's emotions. It's like, if we're looking at astrology, it's like, what does the moon have that the sun is like, whoa? It's that the moon fluctuates and it's changing, and it's predictable, but in this unpredictable way of like, what are you going to be today? I don't know. So the wave of emotions is really, if we're looking at men, and to women, yeah, we go through waves where for men it's like it starts out high, decreases through the day.
Yeah. They don't like the wetness, as Liza
Yeah, the water, the emotions. It's so true.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the whole theme, one of the main things we've been talking about is about like seeing the sun, because I was telling, I think, Holly yesterday before even Sarah joined, I was like, oh, when you guys said let's talk about the sun, my first reaction was like, really? Because because I was telling Holly, like, I've always been like a moon girl, like I remember when I lived in Japan, like one thing I loved about my place was it had like this tiny balcony that always had like a great view of the moon, and whenever there was a full moon, I had like my list of songs that had like full moon or were full moon themed, and I would just like sit outside with like some tea and blankets because it was super cold, and I was just like sing to the moon. And that's always been my thing, like I care about the moon so much. So when we were like, let's talk about the sun, I was like, really? I don't know. Like, but then it's interesting because I guess there is that process of like starting to see the sun, even if it's as a child or whatever, but like of maybe the reason I was able to bring up that thing before about like, oh, we take it for granted or we don't see it. I think it's might be in part a reflection of my own relationship with it as well, with this masculinity, which is definitely in there in me as well, but that maybe I don't quite access it as consciously, or I just don't have the language and the rituals around it to engage with it in a way that doesn't feel like it's trying to take me places that feel weird, or just, yeah, I don't know. But that was interesting as well.
Yeah, you can't actually look directly at the sun.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like the analogy is to God, because the sun was associated with the ninth house, which is the house of God. So yeah, you can't look directly at it.
I think the moon maybe also invites more ritual because she's so changing.
Yeah.
You have, okay, you can do the dawn and the dusk rituals, but it's the same every day. Well, the moon has all these phases that she goes through, and each one requires different rituals, different ways of approaching her. And maybe that's why she speaks to you so, Isabella. The it's a highlight then, the full moon, and it only happens once a month or once every. It's not like every single day. Like, yeah. So she has these highlights which the sun lacks because he's always
Yeah, and I think a little bit what Sarah was saying is like you can't actually look directly at the sun, right? You can't. Whereas the moon,
which wasn't a good idea.
yeah, if any of us have tried, we know that you can't withstand it for too long without consequences. Whereas the moon is the entire opposite. Like the moon, you can actually look for it, and it lets you look at its beauty. So it's such an interesting dynamic, because yeah, the sun, you can look at it directly. You have to see it through its reflection on everything else. So you have to like kind of like see the sun through its proxies on Earth, how they are illuminated because of the sun, but you can't really like directly look at the sun. Whereas the moon is there and it just lets you contemplate it.
This kind of brings me back to Holly's despair about not being seen, because actually how it's set up so that the sun will illuminate. The whole purpose of the sun is to make the moon seen and to make the earth seen. So if we don't have that, it's because the purpose of the sun is, and if we can bring that back, the purpose of the masculine then is to make the feminine also seen and shine, like in salsa dancing, or where the woman is turning and being all beautiful and the man is just being there all stable and supportive.
But the secret is it's the man who's making the cues in any of those dances. No. Like it's the woman who's spinning and who's shining, but it's the guy who's leading. So you need that, right? You need that.
And maybe, Holly, that's why you feel such despair, because that's not how it was supposed to be, the being unseen. It's,
I mean, there's such a power to not being seen too. Like there's something rich and delicious and wonderful about not being seen at times. Which one shows us. And there's something very dangerous about being seen. And then I love that you bring up ritual, Lizelle, because I'm also thinking juxtaposing this idea of the masculine being really stable and consistent, etc. The moon being more phasey. But then at the same time, we also have these other seasons where the sun, the sun rests from being in the sky for a long time. And then when summer comes, there's like this eruption of excitement and joy and wanting to go out. And so that there's changes in that, whereas the moon stays consistent, right? Like it consistently goes through its phases, and then the sun has its seasons. And so it's cool that they actually both have their changing and unchanging qualities.
But that's why yesterday I was saying that, like, it's amazing to see how things is like fractals within fractals within fractals. Like there's a sun and the moon, and there's a moon and the sun, and there's a sun and the moon and the sun and the moon. like you see the, like, however stable the sun might be and however changing the moon might be, then in other aspects the moon is stable and the sun is changing. It's just when you're looking at it, right? So yeah, and it's really interesting to see these things.
Something too about the perfection of the size of the two that allows us to have eclipses. Eclipses are actually the original astral omens. So that's why we have astrology, is because when, I mean, they're observable. So when there was a lunar eclipse, there would be, so for instance, the king would have a fake king in his place, so that when there was an eclipse, there was supposed to be the death of a king. So they would just kill the fake king, and the old king would just reclaim his throne. But there was something magical about these luminaries dancing together.
I see the sun wants to shine on your face as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he's coming in strong.
I've been noticing that for a while. Like, you talk about the sun, and then you get like these streaks of light. It's great.
Speak of the devil.
There it is. Like, okay, time to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love thinking about them as like eyes in the sky, and lovers that are chasing each other, and how that face of perfection and poetry just comes alive when they're both. It's so beautiful. Sun rises and sun sets. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, Holly, I think that there's some room for commentary from like vision questing too. Because it's something that we've experienced, and mine was 2 days. And so this is a ritual where you would sit out in the woods with no food, no water, and no shelter. And it sounds absurd, but it actually, what it does is when you don't have food and water to kind of feed the microbes that we always do, well, you stop thinking with that brain of desire and you start thinking with this brain of love. Interestingly, it's just like, I can't wait to get back home to my family. I'm going to spend more time with them. Those kinds of thoughts were coming to me, but also reverence for the sun and the moon. In fact, the day that I was questing, or the nights that I was questing, the moon was kind of a smile in the sky. It was like a Cheshire cat smile. But the sun is how we know that the day is returning. And when you're sitting out in the woods with no food, no water, and no shelter for 2 days, you're like, okay, all right, that's another one. Like there's so much excitement when you see the sun, and when you watch it get to midday, you're like, okay, halfway there. When you're watching it slowly set, and when you watch, like, as it comes up, the colors, the different colors that are, mixing together in the sky, and it's so brief, and how it kind of reflects off even the spider webs. It's like there's so much reverence that I was feeling for all those things that have stood the test of time. All the, there's trees out there that have been out there for decades. There was the sun and the planets that I knew that were, in a conjunction with one another. So they were very bright. I was so grateful for things that had been there, and particularly the sun, because the sun is this timestamp. It's like, okay, another one. That's another day. There's another day. And before we had this concept of time, like we take it for granted so much that we know that it's, 8 a.m. But that isn't like an objective truth. It's just a way that we measure it. Yeah. So it's interesting because the sun is just like, no, that's objectively true, that when the sun rises in the east, it's morning time.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Isa.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and in that context, it feels like that thing you were saying, like the seeing, it takes away this thing of like the sun being taken for granted, because then it's not just like this puppet light bulb in the sky. It's actually like, it's telling you the time. It's telling you like so many things. Like it has like this so many more layers of detail and relation, right? With, like you said, with the spider webs and all these things. Like it feels like in that context, then the sun starts being not just this background light, but actually, like, I don't know, like a person sitting next to you almost.
Yeah, I was going to say, in my experience, my recent experience, that there was such an intimate connection to ancestors. Everything being an ancestor, and down to the microbes in my gut and beetles crawling on the bark, and these fractals that you're talking about, Isa, and the sense that like, right, I am the sun. And like I had this experience where when I closed my eyes, it became this feeling that I'm now enveloped in darkness, and so I must be a star. Like I'm enveloped in the night sky right now, and so what's shining forward is a star, and just this really amazing dance between opening my eyes and illumination, and seeing the sun. Like I am the sun as I open my eyes, and when I close my eyes, I become part of the night sky, or part of some other, not even other, but yeah, I just felt like a star illuminating, and someone else is seeing me, maybe in the night sky. Yeah, so it's amazing how one's perceptions can change and expand depending on what you pay attention to.
It's interesting that it's called a vision quest, and that was kind of the sense that you were focused on. Because the reason that they call it a vision quest is because you're crying for a vision. So this was something that was traditionally men in their tribes were doing. And so, yeah, it was kind of like this rite of passage. Mm-hmm. And you can definitely sense that that is an effect, that you definitely have a different perspective on your position in life. And yeah, like that idea of like illuminating light so that you can see, so that you can co-create.
Yeah. And I mean, I stayed up all night the last night watching the moon, and it was the night before the harvest moon, and just talking to the moon all night long. And that's where I felt that sense of kind of like loneliness, and also just like her just like gifts when you do pay attention and talk to her. Like she's just like, I have so much wisdom to give you, and it's so how just, you know, it's like a mother being thanked, you know, like a mother being seen and recognized by her kin, of like, God, all the sacrifices and all the beauty you bring into this world. Thank you. And just how nourishing that is. That it's lonely sometimes when no one talks to her. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Word participation keeps coming up for me. It's all participation that we're referring to. Deep and intimate participation with another vow, with another, with not just an eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that's why I said earlier that I had this really strong image that when Sarah was talking about like the relationship with the sun, and seeing it do all these things throughout the day, and seeing it like color nature in different ways, it was like, yeah, then I understand very clearly then how it becomes a person. It doesn't become an it becomes like this other like real entity that you interact with, even if it's not conscious the way we are, or even if it's not, you know, an animal or a human or whatever. And then when it's in that form, you can definitely have a relationship, and you can definitely have this some sort of reciprocity or some sort of interaction that goes beyond you, because that's yeah, that's interesting.
I think it must be a really deep need in our psyches, because as a species we would not have survived probably if we didn't know how to participate with the elements and with the moon and with the sun. So I think it's so deep in who we are, in our genes, in our biology, even this need and desire and ability to participate with the elements as what is the word you used? Isa, you used a really good word, like
Did I use reciprocity? Interaction? I'm not sure.
Both are good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it is our body, isn't it? All of it. If inner and outer aren't separate, truly,
Exactly.
this is our body we're walking in. This is our body we're living in.
But how many of us still have connection with our physical body, even?
Yeah.
I think it's a great analogy for how we're participating with the earth. The way that we participate with our body is, where as far as our bodies are concerned, most of us, myself included, are chasing desire. What food do I want? Even if it's not good for me, or I don't really feel like running today, so I'm just gonna not. It's kind of like, well, there's a chemical spill with that plant, but if they pay the fine, then it's okay. Or, we only go to be outside if it's like we're going to all go to the beach, or we're going to all go, hiking in the mountains. I've got all my hiking gear and these nice sticks that I'm going to walk with this big backpack. It's like, yeah, it's like we go to do that for like special occasions. We have reverence and we appreciate the earth, but not all the time. It's like sometimes it's like, oh, it's raining outside. What a dread, like when it could be, wow, life force is falling from the sky.
Tears are falling. It's awesome.
Oh, Holly, I wish I could send some rain your direction.
Please do. I'm praying and praying and praying and praying. So yes.
Moisture.
Yeah. And I think this is why it feels, I don't know if you all are feeling this as well, but this resonance with ritual. Like it's like, this is the participation. This is how we honor feeding the sacred, feeding the sacred. It reminds us, it helps us remember this perspective that we aren't, this is our body, and it takes effort. It takes, it's like writing a love letter. It's like, it's a courting. It does take some sacrifice and energy, but God, we got to remember. Remember.
I was writing about that because I was a little bit worried because, but indeed the ritual in the rain was the most powerful ritual that I did this weekend, and I was a little bit worried because there is a magical element to it.
Yes.
And of course, everyone knows who my teacher is, and he's not positive about magic, and or at least he said it's the opposite of wisdom, and wisdom is what I strive for. But ritual does not necessarily change the world. It changes us. And when we change, the world change. And that is how ritual works, because we are transformed through ritual. We see differently, we become differently by participating in that.
I do wonder if it doesn't change the world though, to an aspect.
But because it changes us.
Yeah. Because I know when I'm feeding, that's what I'm feeding. I'm feeding the spirits. I'll call it that. Like the ancestors. I'm feeding them. I'm giving thanks. And there's something I feel the tree receive it. I feel the tree light up. Like I really feel that. And again, like, okay, what's happening here? But I don't know. I just know what happens. Love.
But that could also be because, Holly, like you said, the earth is also part of us.
Yes.
And we are part of the world, of the earth. So when I say we transform, maybe what I'm saying is we transform.
Yeah. I mean, which is why when Sarah was saying like how, I mean, it's me again with my fractals. I'm gonna be now the fractal girl. but like no, but it was like when Sarah was saying like
You said the fracker.
like how our numbness and our disconnection to our own bodies is like a parallel to mankind's disconnection to earth, and it's like the same thing, right? It's like if we find, and I do believe the same thing, is like it probably starts with us. Like if we find a way to be with our bodies, then that hopefully will lead the way to us being with earth as our collective mankind body or something. I don't know, that sounds like a nightmare vision, but that same kind of thing, in other words. Yeah, I think there's something there for sure. There's something there for sure.
This kind of conversation is putting that spotlight on exactly what it is that we're kind of all feeling, which is the yin, the feminine. This needs to be illuminated. And the only way to do that is for us to focus a conversation around it. And because we are willing to do that, now we are bringing that light to wherever this ends up. Whoever ends up getting to listen to this and watch this will have that part of their, collective memory illuminated. And it'll be like, oh yeah, I didn't think about all that. So that's what our souls here are combining to illuminate that container that we take for granted.
Yeah, it's like the sun's reflecting the moon, and then the moon's light is reflecting. Some really cool stuff.
I like that. Like astral pinball.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to the image of woman being made from the soul of
That's
what is the woman's feet from whom we are made?
Like the divine, like the kind of the divine old woman archetype, like the sort of she who knows that yes, women are created from the soul of her foot. And then they said, that shoes are like blindfolds on the feet, like you were saying. Like we've lost contact, we've lost like our souls being connecting with the earth and feeling that.
Yeah.
But yeah, a wrinkle on the sole of the foot. It's so beautiful.
I like that.
Well, it feels like maybe a good time to wrap up. So yeah, and maybe just invite anyone has any sort of final thoughts or offerings.
Well, as an astrologer, just kind of a review of the sun and like the things that it represents is our the ideal to which we strive. It can be our relationship with God, our relationship with the Father, our relationship with the masculine, our relationship with our yang energy. So all of this internalized, not necessarily like a man in your life or, yang is energy that we all have within us. It is our, like Isabella said earlier, it is doing where the moon is being. So any kind of like action that we take towards what our life path is that is illuminated by this sun, the path of the sun, these are all kinds of key words to keep in mind when you think about what the sun meant as far as it applies to ancient astrology.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that not that I came in with any agenda at all, but I do feel like I leave with a different sense about the sun. Like I said before this, I was like, okay, sure, the sun, it's there. I don't know, whatever. And now I definitely have this like, okay, I have this curiosity to see and try to not take it for granted and try to see things that maybe have been like, like try to either not ignore, but just like deal with the obnoxiousness and see what's behind that. And I think now I have this like sense of curiosity, which I think it's a good place to tackle it from, to kind of see where that takes me and see what path it illuminates. So yeah, just not that it was at all part of my plan. I just find it interesting that that's the feeling I have right now after this conversation.
I have no final words. I was just wondering if either of you maybe have like some sort of parting ritual that we can.
Before we start our meetings with Tan Astrology, Tan has this ritual where we actually breathe before. We just take a moment to breathe. And that's kind of nice, just to get back into the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could take some breaths collectively, maybe 3 breaths, and then sometimes it's nice too. I kind of like having like just 3 simple words that you're taking away with you, like gifts that you received in this journey. And I just want to say a couple of things real quick. One is really loving, like Isa, you really illuminated something for me in talking about the different ways the sun colors the earth throughout the day. And like, yeah, like how the sun like makes the world shine and shows different colors, and Sarah's face, you know, throughout this, you know. So many different lights and how it shows that off. And again, I'm resonating with you there on like, oh yeah, like that curiosity and that appreciation. Again, my resistance as well kind of coming in. I shared that with you. So it feels nice to soften to the sun. And I just also want to say how lovely it is to get to know each one of your faces, like in this more intimate way. And you know, we've obviously get little bite-sized snippets of each other's inner worlds, and that's been what a wonderful starting point. But it's also feeling so whole making. That's the word that's coming to mind. WHOLE making. In getting to dive a little bit deeper into your beautiful minds and bodies and perspectives. So just really want to send some appreciation for this time together and opportunity to know each other a little more intimately. Yeah, so do you want to do the 3 breaths and then maybe 3 words?
I like that.
Or do we want to do it collectively, or just? I'm not necessarily a meditation leader in this regard. Yeah, maybe we just do them. Oh yeah, what do you think, Sarah?
I was just going to say, you'll notice people's eyes open. I think that's usually, that's the sign. Now you don't have to close your eyes, but usually that's your like, okay, they're done.
Okay, yeah, the sun's out. Their eyes are open. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. So we'll just do them on our own, and then.
Okay.
My words, can you hear me now? Are love, reciprocity, and light.
Mine are participation, illumination, and reflection.
whole, like WHOLE, gentleness, and inspiration.
To share, one word, share. The other one is soul, SOL. And innocence.
All right. Do we feel like it's appropriate to schedule another one of these now?
Yeah, totally.
For sure.
Okay.